thank you all so much for coming down this evening for the launch of our new AMEB Trumpet publications and various different offerings for the trumpet syllabus that AMEB has. I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to launch our activities for this year and the various different things that we've been working on. So thank you so much for coming. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we stand. And I would like to also pay respect to Wurundjeri elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend this respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people from other communities who may be here today. So thank you very, very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us launching our new trumpet offerings, which we really hope will be of lasting benefit to all users of AMEB Trumpet syllabuses, of the AMEB Trumpet syllabus, teachers and students alike. In particular, I'd like to welcome Mike Tyler, Chair of AMEB's Federal Board of Directors, who joins us from Brisbane today, Bernard Di Pasquale, CEO of the AMEB Federal Office, Alwyn Mott, State Manager for AMEB Victoria, and members of staff from both AMEB Victoria and the Federal Office. Also particularly Leah Phillips, who has done so much to organise the event today. I'd like to say an enormous thank you to Yamaha for their multifaceted support of this event, including providing this wonderful venue and making it possible for us to be joined by Joel Brennan, Dr. Joel Brennan, who is a Yamaha artist, our guest artist for this evening, and who will be providing the fun bits of the formal ceremony. There are a couple of contributors to the new trumpet releases who I'd like to thank also. Simon Brown, I believe, is here. I haven't actually met you face to face. Hello, Simon. Simon was part of the what we call the Specialist Advisory Group, who are a high-level oversight, who provide high-level oversight of all of the decisions made about the grade books and the technical work and all the various different things that we do behind the scenes to produce a release like this. Joel Brennan was also a member of this group, so we thank them both for their really significant contribution. And so pleased that you can join us tonight. As I mentioned, for the event this evening, we are absolutely delighted to be joined by Yamaha artist Joel Brennan. Joel is a teacher and a highly regarded performer of both contemporary and chamber music repertoire. He's performed with orchestras all over the world, including Melbourne and Tasmanian symphony orchestras in Europe, Canada, and Asia. He's a member of Ensemble 3, a unique trio of guitar, trombone, and trumpet that has been called an inspiring example of forward-thinking music culture. He's a senior lecturer at the Melbourne Conservatorium of Music and has just returned from China, where he's on faculty at the Juilliard School's new campus in Tianjin, working with students in the pre-college program and graduate school, as well as performing with the Tianjin Juilliard Ensemble, a flexible instrumentation chamber ensemble. Joel, as I mentioned, contributed significantly to this year's AMEB Trumpet releases as a member of the Specialist Advisory Group, which oversaw the contents of the grade books, the constitution of the technical work, and make-up of the new preliminary and certificate of performance manual lists. Joel will be joined tonight by Michelle Nguyen. I'm not sure. There she is. Hi, Michelle. A Melbourne-based pianist in high demand as a collaborative performer. Michelle has worked extensively with the Australian Ballet, is a frequent performer in musicals, and is the trumpet studio pianist at the Melbourne Conservatorium of Music. She holds an L.Mus in piano and recently completed grade 3 in euphonium. So, new trumpet releases. What have we got for you? New technical work. We've rewritten the technical work from preliminary all the way through to grade 8, and this is all set out in a new technical work and orchestral excerpts book, which contains absolutely everything you need from preliminary through to grade 8 for technical work and orchestral excerpts. We have a new Series 2 grade book series, from preliminary to grade 4, which contains all of the repertoire that you would need to complete those examinations, preliminary through to grade 4. We also have manual lists, of course, in the syllabus documents, but this is a new set of repertoire in AMEB gradebooks. Supporting those gradebooks, we have recorded accompaniments. These haven't been available for trumpet previously, but they're something that's being rolled out across all AMEB syllabuses as we can. This is for preliminary to grade 3 only. They are high-level recordings made by Peter Diego, who is an Australian, Melbourne-based pianist. And you can use them both for practice and examination purposes. We have a new sight reading and transposition book available, which has over 120 examples of graded sight reading at each grade from preliminary to grade 8. There's no sight reading requirement in the preliminary examination, but we've included sight reading at preliminary level just for practice purposes. It's something we'd like to encourage people to start practicing from the very, very beginning. Finally, we have 2 new examinations, which brings the trumpet syllabus into line with most of the other syllabuses that the AMEB offers. The first of these is, of course, preliminary at the very beginning, and then the certificate of performance, which sits between grade 8 and A-. This is a recital-style examination, which was conceived as to serve 2 purposes. One as a capping level for level 2, a capping grade for level 2, and one as a sort of bridge to the recital-style examinations of level 3, the associate and licentiate diplomas. So, in order to do this, AMEB engaged a team of trumpet and brass specialists, and our main consultant for this undertaking was Phil Ryan. Phil Ryan is a prominent performer and educator based north of Brisbane. He was formerly a member of the MSO, later principal trumpet with the Queensland Philharmonic Orchestra, as well as a great variety of different performance activities. He now has a significant profile as an educator, working in a wide variety of contexts, taking a lot of students all the way from private studio students through to schools and tertiary level students. Greg Aitken, who was the reviewer for all of these books and for the syllabus. Greg previously had reviewed the manual lists. I think you'd probably be aware that in 2017 the manual lists for the trumpet syllabus were revised, and Greg oversaw that. Brendan Collins, who was the sight reading composer and also put together the lists for the new certificate of performance. Brendan is a well-known composer for brass instruments, a very well-known teacher and the chief brass examiner in New South Wales. And finally, Joel Brennan, Simon Brown, Scott Kinmont and David Musk, all of whom have prominent profiles as educators in a range of contexts, who formed the Specialist Advisory Group, who was just another layer of oversight to the decisions being made about the gradebooks and the technical work and the new examinations in the syllabus. So we'd like to take you through in detail what these new offerings are all about. Starting with the technical work, which is often the most argued about and the most fraught part of the process of devising a new syllabus and releasing a new syllabus. So, as part of the new release, we have a new technical workbook, which sets out the new technical work in a clear step-by-step format. The consultants had a real focus on consolidating technique fundamentals rather than extending students with too many scales and too many technical exercises. There was a real focus on consolidating the fundamentals and improving tone quality, partly by making sure that the technical work wasn't too onerous and was nicely streamlined, but also building into the technical exercises the aspect of tone quality and sound production. We've also included all of the trumpet orchestral excerpts, which were previously published in brass orchestral excerpts released in 2004. So there's no longer a need for a separate orchestral excerpts book. It's all in the technical work and orchestral excerpts book. So within the book, each grade appears as a separate standalone chapter. We've tried to make sure that there's minimal flicking between pages to find the right scale or exercise. And at the beginning of each chapter, we've put together a summary page which lays out very clearly exactly what's required for that grade. It details all of the scales, arpeggios and technical exercises. And the summary page looks a little bit like that, which might be a little bit tricky to see. So within the technical exercises, or within the technical work, we've aimed at 3 or 4 key centres per grade, with the exception of preliminary and grade 1. The earlier grades have a few less, obviously. The scales and arpeggios are all fully notated and organised by key centre. Sorry. Great. Fully notated and organised by key centre. And there are a number of technical exercises, 3 or 4 per grade, to supplement the scales and arpeggios, with a focus on consolidating fundamental techniques. The exercises fall into several categories, including lip slur exercises, Clark-style fingering exercises, expanding intervals, and then double and triple tonguing exercises in level 2. So we've done our best to make it very straightforward, very streamlined, and hopefully very, very approachable. I'll show you the technical work spread for preliminary, for example. This is all of the technical work required for preliminary, set out on a double page. Obviously, as we go up in grades, more scales, more exercises, but everything just follows one by one, so that a student can just follow straight down the page without having to flick around. So, a really exciting aspect of this release, of course, is our grade books, which will contain repertoire for examination from preliminary through to grade 4. Again, as we were having the initial discussions with the consultants, they really wanted to focus on appealing and useful repertoire with a really clear pedagogical purpose. For each piece, we've also included performance notes, which are at the end of each piece in the part book. These are written by the consultant Phil Ryan and contain performance and teaching tips, identifying potential areas of difficulty and suggesting strategies to assist teachers and students. All of this is on the same page as the actual piece. So within the grade books we have a 3-list structure. List A is unaccompanied, and the consultants have selected a number of familiar tunes which hopefully will appeal to students of all ages to achieve and reinforce technical and musical goals. For instance, in grade 1 we have Happy Birthday, looking at a number of different aspects, including dotted rhythms, a little bit of articulation, and then the big octave leap. In List B, we have a number of pieces, including trumpet-specific repertoire from the Baroque, classical and Romantic periods, but also arrangements of favourite classical pieces, so that they're still tunes that students have heard, and hopefully the students will be motivated to practice. This is the Moldau by Smetana. And then finally in List C, works in the diversity of styles from the 20th and 21st centuries. These include jazz, soundtracks, pop and rock tunes, as well as art music with a particular focus on Australian composers. We've got Queen's We Are the Champions as an example of that. So, just some selected highlights from our grade books, our new grade books. Oops, sorry. At preliminary level, students can present Frere Jacques as a List A, Beethoven's Song of Joy as a List B, Bruce Pearson's Sawmill Creek, Paul McCartney's Mull of Kintyre as List C. Grade 1, we've got Happy Birthday to You in List A as an unaccompanied work, Haydn's Emperor's Hymn, Smetana's The Moldau, Bernstein's I Feel Pretty, or the theme from Postman Pat by Brian Daly. Grade 2, Waltzing Matilda and All Canada, the Canadian national anthem, of course, in List A, Handel's Hallelujah Chorus, Offenbach's Can Can in List B, the Blackadder theme by Howard Goodall, for Queens We Are the Champions, Grade 3, Advanced Australia Fair in List A, as well as Sibelius's Finlandia, Gounod's Soldiers Chorus, or Greensleeves in List B, and the Los Bravos hit Black is Black in List C. And finally, Grade 4, The Last Post in List A, La Réjouissance from Handel's Firework Music, and Triumphal March from Verdi's Aida in List B, and Duke Ellington's Don't Get Around Much Anymore, or themes from Prokofiev's Lieutenant Kije in List C. So as you can see, it's a wide diversity of styles. We hope that it's very appealing and has a lot of teachable moments within it, advice them out. And these are, as I mentioned earlier, supported by the recorded accompaniments which we have recorded here in Melbourne. These are recordings of all of the piano accompaniments featured in the new Series 2 grade books from preliminary all the way through to Grade 3. As I mentioned, performed by Melbourne pianist Peter Diego. They can be used for practice purposes and also in examination if necessary. And these are available online by most music outlets, including Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play, as well as the AMEB shop. There's one more book that I'd like to talk a little bit about before we get over to Joel playing some real music. Sight Reading and Transposition is a book of graded sight reading exercises, really to help guide students and teachers as to the level of sight reading in each grade. For the first time, we're also offering graded transposition exercises from Grade 3 to Grade 8, where they're required in AMEB examinations. This is all linked to the new technical work. So in general, the scales that are featured in the sight reading are linked to the previous year's technical work, so that it's material that is really internalised by the students by the time it's being studied in sight reading. And these were all composed by Brendan Collins, a prominent Australian composer for brass, a prominent teacher, and as I mentioned, the chief brass examiner in New South Wales. So enough of me, let's hear some of the actual music. It gives me very great pleasure to welcome our guests tonight, Yamaha artist Joel Brennan and Michelle Nguyen, who will be performing some selections from the grade books for you.
That was The Good Life, which is the List B piece from Preliminary, I believe, and that's written by Ryan Nolan. And when deciding which pieces to perform tonight, I had a couple of things that I wanted to keep in mind, and this is both for the grade book pieces and for the list pieces that we'll play for you later. One is that I wanted to have a good representation of different types of music. I wanted to focus on some of the newer things that are in the AMEB collection, and in particular works by living composers, Australian composers, and female composers. And I think all three of those categories have been expanded across all of the year levels in grades, which is quite nice. So Ryan Nolan, born 1978, so a rather young composer. The next one we'll play is the List B from Grade 1, and this is the Smetana example that you saw on the screen a moment ago from the Moldau. With regard to technical things as well, the previous piece I rather like because it has this pattern of crotchet, two quavers, but it keeps changing between slurred and tongued on both the crotchets that succeed each other and on the quavers. And so I like to think of this as a very good early lesson in playing the ink. You don't slur when it's convenient or when you think it sounds good. You slur when the composer says to do so. And when I sat down and I read this myself, I found myself wanting to do things other than what was on the page. And I thought, actually, this is a very, very good example to have straight off the bat with somebody entering prelim, because it teaches them to really pay attention to what was written. With the Moldau, it's quite nice. Everybody knows the tune. It's very lovely. It's one of my favorite pieces of classical music. But I really like it because it's a famous tune. It's in a minor key, and with young children, we often distinguish major and minor with happy and sad. Of course, we all know that it's much more nuanced than that. And so this is a minor key piece that is by no means sad in any way whatsoever. And with regard to trumpet technique, there's repeated pitches that you have to articulate, which for trumpet players, particularly young trumpet players, often can sound either very choppy or totally braced and slurred. And so to distinguish between those takes some control. So the Moldau. Okay, so that's the surprise, it doesn't stay minor. The next piece is a List C piece, and this is called A Hero Is Called by Carrie Thomas. So a young female composer, 1984. And this one's really good because the player really needs to learn how to subdivide. The feature rhythm in this is a dotted crotchet followed by 2 semiquavers, and then sometimes a dotted crotchet followed by a quaver that's slurred. And to really place the 2 semiquavers clearly, it takes subdividing on the dotted crotchet, which is a good skill to develop at this point. But more than that, there's some stylistic considerations that the student can talk about with their teacher. How short do you play those semiquavers? When you slur to a quaver from a dotted crotchet, how short do you play it? Do you play it light, separated? Do you play it long? And different places in the music might suggest different things. So quite a message to it. The next selection, which is from grade 3, is another List C piece, and this is by the British composer Christopher Norton. And this comes in 2 movements, so perhaps the student's first opportunity to play a multi-movement piece. It's called Big Time and Bright Spark. And it's tricky for the trumpet player because it's full of mixed articulations, slurred, followed by staccato notes, some notes that aren't marked either staccato or tenuto that you have to decide what to do with. It introduces the grace note, but moreover, it also introduces a new style of music. I wouldn't say that it's jazz by any means whatsoever, but it's popular or jazz influenced. And the second movement, Bright Spark, continues on in this and introduces a bit of mixed meter. So we have some 2/4s and 3/4s that alternate. And I know from our rehearsal, Michelle will be counting, but I'll do my best to do the same. I also forgot to mention in that, with regards to technique, the octave leaps down too. A really nice thing to have in there for the students. The final piece is grade 4, List C by Craig Ross. And this is called Blue Mountain. And so really nice to have a living Australian composer and a place in here, our home country. The piece Blue Mountain has a bit of a fanfare, majestic type of flavor to it, but it also has some nice lyrical moments as well. So this is the final grade book piece, Blue Mountain. Oh, it's great because it teaches you the form. There's a del segno that you then need to take through the coda to fine, and Michelle's laughing. I won't tell which one of us missed it every single time we rehearsed.
The other aspect of this release that we haven't covered quite in detail yet are the 2 new examinations which have been added to the trumpet syllabus. The first of these, of course, is preliminary, at the very, very beginning of students' journey on the trumpet. And this really focuses on short, appealing repertoire and very approachable technical work. We showed you the little 2-page spread earlier. Very limited range, and just to get students started. Students can select repertoire from the gradebook, the new preliminary gradebook. There is also a manual list that they can select from if they wish. The technical work is all in the new technical work and orchestral excerpts book, and there's a set of recorded accompaniments for the works in the gradebook also. The other new examination is the certificate of performance. which, as I mentioned earlier, is a grade that has been rolled out across AMEB examinations for some time now, and we're very pleased to add it to the trumpet syllabus. This is a grade, or an examination that caps level 2. It's a recital style examination, programmed between 25 and 35 minutes, drawn from the manual lists in the syllabus, and it functions both as a capping grade for level 2 and as a bridge to the level 3 examinations, which are obviously a recital style examination as the associate diploma and licentiate diploma examinations. Brendan Collins put these lists together, and there's a real focus, a real diversity of repertoire and a great focus on Australian works as well. There's no technical work required for the certificate of performance, so it's a true recital style examination. Speaking of which, we will invite Joel and Michelle back to the stage one more time and to perform a selection of material, some from the certificate of performance lists and some from higher lists. So we're very excited to hear a little bit of wow material from Joel and Michelle. Thank you.
We're going to start with the first movement of the Foch Concerto, which is listed there. And I chose this one. I really love the piece. It's a Baroque era piece, performed on the piccolo trumpet, which is what you would see from any of the examinees for AMEB exams. It's, I think, quite a strong concerto for the trumpet from the Baroque era, and I wanted to play it tonight, at least a snippet of it, given some time constraints, because I think one of the things that's important about the syllabus for AMEB is that what makes it so nice is that it's rooted in the Western canon, right? So this is one of the more important pieces for trumpet. I would imagine that you would see it on the syllabus of examination systems elsewhere in the world as well. But you'll see as the program progresses, I also wanted to highlight some of the new pieces in the certificate of performance and play some Australian pieces, because this isn't an exam syllabus from London in 1910, and that's what makes one of the strengths of the AMEB. It's not some thing from 100 years ago that might be great 100 years ago, but music has changed, music has evolved. Australia is its own unique musical culture, and I hope that the selections after the Foch give a glimpse of that, but it's one of the real strengths of the syllabus to have those pieces in there. So we'll start with Foch, and then I'll introduce the pieces as we go. I think all of the Australian trumpet and cornet players would know. But for me, having emigrated to Australia, I had to be introduced to it later in life. This is Percy Code's Zelda. Now, if you don't know Percy Code, because you're from me, the other side of the world, Percy Code was an Australian cornet player who was like Herbert L. Clark or Jean-Baptiste Arbon, in that he was a soloist who toured the world, in fact, playing cornet solos and writing them for himself as well. So this is a really famous and fantastic one called Zelda. And I know I'm committing a fatal sin by not playing it on cornet. And I hope you don't tell the immigration department, because they might hold my application for citizenship if they find out. But sadly, I've just come back from China yesterday, and I did not have a cornet with me in China, and I didn't feel it would be too wise to play it on an instrument I hadn't been practicing on. So this is a great piece. It's sort of early 20th century. Fun, shows off a bit of trumpet technique, super cheesy, and I hope you enjoy it. The next selection is called Cantilena, from the new Certificate of Performance list. And this is a piece by the British composer Carol Barrett, who's still with us. She's still writing a lot of works over there, and this made it into a collection of pieces that were commissioned by the International Trumpet Guild about 15 years ago, and they published it with Boozy and Hodgson. The book is called Go Blow Your Own, and it has fantastic little recital pieces by people, including Ned Rorem, the major U.S. composer, as well as others. And this is my first time playing it. I prepared it for this because I saw it on the list, and it's really quite a beautiful little melody, and it's in 5/4, which is a nice thing for student staff to figure out how to do, and professionals. This is a piece by the Sydney-based composer Matthew Heinzen. And I've met Matthew a couple of times. He's head of composition at the Sydney Con, and he's one of Australia's leading living composers. You may have heard his music without even knowing it. It's often performed with the Australian Ballet. He has many, many pieces that have been used by the ballet in their dance suites. And he's a fantastic composer, and he wrote this piece. I'm not quite sure what for originally, but the copy I have is for C trumpet and piano. And I've never heard it performed. And I think that's because it's bloody hard. And those who tend to perform it are saxophonists, because it also exists in a published form for saxophone and piano. So this may be the one time you get to hear it until you sit in on exams. This is Ignition Positive by Matthew Heinzen. And the first half of the piece starts as a very lyrical, beautiful, what might sound like taps or some sort of bugle call. And then the party starts. So I hope you enjoy the party. And I hope we survive the ignition. Matthew Heinzen's Ignition Positive.
Joel and Michelle. That was a really inspiring performance and a wonderful representation of the contents of the new certificate lists. I'm going to get Joel back onto the stage now. Now that we have you, and now that you're breathless after your performance, we'd like to ask you a few little questions just to borrow some of your knowledge and some of your experience. And, so we've just prepared a few questions for you. What is it about the trumpet that initially got you hooked? And what is it these days that keeps you driven, keeps you motivated, keeps you doing what you do?
That's a good question. Some of you may have heard me, I'm not quite as tall as you. Some of you may have heard me talk about this in the past, but I was not actually initially showing a particular interest in music when I was a student in school. But in my social group, a lot of my friends were. And so I guess peer pressure, not quite, but I just wanted to do something with my friends, and they were starting to play instruments. And so that's literally why I started music. It sounds a little bit funny, but actually this thread continues throughout all of my life, this sort of music as a social enterprise, because I did it then to be with my friends, and then when I was in secondary school, a lot of my friends who were musicians were branching off and doing different types of music. I grew up in the United States, so marching band was a thing, so I played with the marching band, and I had a friend who was interested in jazz, and so I played with the jazz band, and I had a friend who was a string player, so I started playing with orchestras, and this has always been the thing that keeps me coming back to music, is doing it with people I care about, and it's fun. It's fun to hang with your friends. It's fun to rehearse with them. It's fun to perform with them. It's fun to celebrate after the performances with them. It's how I met my wife. We were performing together, and we still perform together. And so for me, it's that communal music making thing that is most important.
And still to this day.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. If you were a teacher teaching the young Joel trumpet in the beginning years of your life, what advice would you have for him?
I think I'd have to say that it has taken me too long to realize this, and I think I'm still realizing it, that the primary limitation for my technical development and musical development has always been myself. I remember being around people who had started instruments earlier than me or who had been playing longer than me and seeing what they could do, hearing what they could do on their instruments and thinking, I'm not capable of that. I won't be able to learn that if I try, therefore I won't try. And that's foolish, that's absurd. And the thing I see most with my students is that the ones that are completely fearless, that don't even have a concept that, I'm, 165 centimeters, maybe I'm not gonna be able to slam dunk like Michael Jordan, and they just go for it, they figure out a way. And so I think if I were a teacher that could go back and talk to young Joel Brennan, even Joel Brennan at 15 or 20 or 25 or 30, it's something I'm still telling myself today, that I'm the only one setting the limitations on myself. And surely, again, at 165 centimeters, I'm not going to be as good as Michael Jordan, but if I practice, I get good.
You can find a
And
way.
so to not be the person blocking my own development.
That's beautiful. Are there any trumpeters today or through history accessible via recordings or whatever that you really esteem and that really inspire you? And what is it about a great performance that really gets you going?
Yeah, it's funny, my answer will be somebody who is the furthest thing from what I've done in my career. Early on, I was very, very fortunate to be introduced to the music of a man called Clark Terry, who was a jazz trumpet player, and later I got to meet and do some work with him. And he was a jazz trumpet player who was, he was the lead trumpet of the Count Basie band. He was at the prime, in jazz's prime, and outlived a lot of his peers because he never succumbed to some of the vices that people that he ran with sadly fell to. And if you've heard any of his recordings or seen him perform or even met him, you'll know that his voice when he speaks and when he sings is identical to his voice when he plays the trumpet, which is identical to his personality. And when he gets up on stage or recording, it just joy is exuded from everything he does. And for me, that's, I love the music, he's a phenomenal trumpet player, like all that stuff. But it's that absolute joy of music making, and I don't think anybody could ever encapsulate that the way he does. But I like to think that's what I'd like to go for, is that it doesn't matter what the piece of the music is, the act of playing it should be, it's a huge privilege. It should be joyful, and you should hopefully be able to impart some of that to the audience as well. I sat through many Clark Terry performances, and I would go home and my face would hurt as if I were playing, and it wasn't some sort of sympathetic thing because he was playing hard music. It's because I was smiling the whole time. It was just so good. So Clark Terry, without a doubt. If you don't own a Clark Terry record, you're doing yourself a disservice.
That's really interesting. I hear a lot of singers talk about, when you see a singer and they don't sing the way they speak, and there's some sort of disjointed alignment between the way they speak and the way they sing, that there's something difficult to get through in performance, and there's some sort of barrier. But I've never heard an instrumentalist say the same thing about the way they speak and the way they play.
Yeah, he's a really unique guy. It was just amazing.
Amazing.
It was.
Obviously, you teach in different countries, and you perform in different countries. Is there anything about Australia? Are there any particular challenges about teaching in Australia? Any interesting things about teaching and playing in Australia that you don't find elsewhere in the world?
Yeah, well, I'm currently back and forth between China and Australia, and I think Australia has a lot in common with how I grew up in the United States. And China, I'm still learning about China and still exploring it. And I would say that if you have a stereotypical image of what it's like to have a strict upbringing and a strict teacher, the sort of quintessential sort of tiger mom type of thing, I would say that those stereotypes, from what I have seen, are largely true. And it can be an amazing, really amazing effect. Really, really amazing effect, because teachers are incredibly invested. Parents are so enormously invested in their children's education and will literally sell the shirt off their own back to help provide their kids with the best education, which is really great. And the students just work really hard. And it's amazing. The thing that is challenging for me operating there is that the traditional way of teaching doesn't include a lot of encouragement or positive reinforcement. And so I'd like to think that, you know, with my students there, I try to bring some of what I am used to, which is, you know, if you're working hard and you're doing a good job and getting better, you should let that be known. The other thing that's different in China is that I think a lot of musicians come to the plate with a different mindset. You are only there to win. You know, don't show up to the game unless you plan to win. And it's great. Again, like I said, they work enormously hard as a result of it. I mean, I've had such a wonderful time teaching students up there. But that's the reason why they're studying. They study music so that they can achieve their absolute best, be the best, and whatever it is, win the competition, get the job, et cetera, et cetera. And that has wonderful things. The thing that's quite different from me, and I think the United States and Australia have in general, and it's one of the things that I think AMEB encompasses extremely well, is that there's many different reasons to come to music. It's not just to solo with the Berlin Philharmonic, or to be concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic, or, you know, whatever it is. You might come to music so that you can participate more eagerly in your local brass band, or your community orchestra, or your church choir, or your church praise band, or just because you enjoy playing. And I think there's what I've seen thus far in China is that there's not a lot of room for that there. So I could be wrong. And I think that that's one of the really, really wonderful things about being here. The flip side of that, however, is that people have lots of interests. And Australian students, much more so than American students, are involved with a lot of stuff at school. You know, the school takes a lot of time. Most are involved with sport, either at school or not at school, as well as a host of other extracurricular activities. And in the long run, I actually think this is a really good thing. It, you know, makes a really well-rounded person. But one can only focus so much. And so if your goal is to be the concertmaster with the New York Philharmonic, or just solo with the New York Philharmonic, et cetera, you know, finding a way to help frame that for students can be tricky because of the community demands.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure the teachers in this room will understand that very well.
Probably even more so than me.
Look, thank you so much, Joel, both for your very inspiring performance and your inspiring words, and for making this such an amazing launch event, and for obviously your contribution to the syllabus itself and the publications.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about it. It's a great syllabus, and it's a great collection of books.
Yeah. Thanks, Joel.